Well, good evening and welcome to NCM's continuing series where we get to meet and talk to all of our Norwood veterans, both young and old. And this evening it gives me great pleasure to welcome into the studio Officer Rick McGowan. Officer McGowan, how are you? Welcome.
Very well, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. I appreciate it this evening. Proud member, as Mike Maloof mentioned, of the class of Norwood High School here, 2007.
That's correct.
And you served in the Army, in the infantry, from 2009 to 2012, right?
Yes.
Yep, active duty. And you are now, as mentioned, a member of the Norwood Police Department.
That's correct.
So, what we've been doing kind of in these series is trying to get to know, as I said, a lot of our veterans that live here in Norwood and kind of get a little bit of their background and to take the time to thank them for all that they've put in and the work that they've done. And one of the things I usually kind of start with is asking folks, as you were growing up here in Norwood, when did the idea of serving your country kind of start to percolate?
For me, it didn't probably come in until after graduating high school. I was never in school thinking like this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. I want to go serve and everything like that. I wasn't the greatest student. I did what I had to get by and graduated, and then went into the workforce with the Carpenters Union. Yeah. And then they had a big layoff in '08, and I just couldn't sit around anymore. My grandfather had served, my uncle had served, so I figured why not give it a shot. So
there's some family history, in terms of service to the country. You chose the Army, and of the four branches, what drew you to the Army?
Honestly, I think just the Army, because my uncle had served in the Army. My grandfather was in the Navy, but the Army recruiter station was probably the easiest one to go to be honest with you.
It's location,
yeah,
location,
it's just
location.
Right down the road, not too far. So,
at the time that you joined the Army, the war in Afghanistan is in full force at this point. So, what's going through your mind knowing there's a very real possibility that, signing up and joining the Army, and in your case, the infantry, there's the very real possibility that you're going to be sent into harm's way. Mentally, how do you process that, and how does that roll through your decision making?
So I took the test for the ASVAB and got my choices, and then they show you these videos of what that MOS conducts on a daily basis. And honestly, the video they showed for the infantry, I was like, that's what I want to do. Yeah. I never had a thought in my mind of going to Iraq or Afghanistan during that time, and I just wanted to do what I thought I would enjoy the most. And after signing up and choosing to be in the infantry, and I told my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, that this is what I was doing, and she started crying and telling me, you're crazy. Yeah. What makes you want to do that? But I think for me personally, it was the best decision, and I had a great experience. I loved it, and met some great people from all over this great country of ours, and it was just quite an enjoyment. So you obviously have to go through basic training, and before we came on, I mentioned my nephew served in the Marines, and so I got to go to see his graduation, as it were, and he was describing basic training. And what was yours like? I mean, to go into that type of military experience now, what was basic training like? So for the infantry, it's down at Fort Benning, which is the home of the infantry down in Georgia. The infantry in the Army is very, very proud of themselves. So you're just with all infantrymen. There's no other MOS with you. Some of the other ones, they all combine, but it's just strictly infantry. Yep. You have the same drill sergeants the entire time. The one thing that sticks out in my mind is, arriving in the bus to when we were actually getting to our drill sergeants. We had one drill sergeant on the bus. He didn't say a word the entire time. We pull up to this huge field, almost like a football field, and he just turns around and he calmly says, "You have 10 seconds to get off my bus," and walks off. People were jumping out the emergency hatch. Some people were throwing their bags out the window. And I'm thinking to myself, what did I get into? So I get off the bus, then you got to carry your bag over your head the entire time. You can't let your elbows interlock. You have them locked out. And then all of a sudden, just a wave of drill sergeants come down, which they call it a shock attack. Yeah. And I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
They're shooting blank rounds, they're setting off mortar rounds, there's explosions going around. Now the whole entire time I'm like, what am I doing?
Welcome to the Army.
Yeah. So, but it was awesome. You know, it just throws you into that right away to know, like, hey, eventually this could happen, especially being infantry. You know, you're gonna deploy. We're at war. You know, so they just throwing you right in there.
And would you say the training that you received, you know, at this point, you know, prepared you for obviously what you eventually were sent to do over in Afghanistan?
Definitely. You know, they work a lot on close combat situations with room clearing and walking through fields, and you know they have you doing bounding cover, just things that you would see over in Afghanistan when you're moving. When I went to Afghanistan, it was completely different than what I expected. I expected, you know, a beach with no water.
Yeah.
But you know, it was actually a beautiful part of the country where we were.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would say the basic really helped out, and you know, the continuous training, training all the time, just getting you ready for that.
Yeah. Now, we sit here, you know, thousands of miles away from Afghanistan, and with today's TV coverage, we can see things kind of as they're unfolding or almost instantaneously. You know, but we're doing that from the comfort of our homes. You're there, as they say, you know, on the front lines. What was that experience like, you know, from the infantry basis?
So when we first got there, we went into Kandahar Air Force Base, and then we flew in a Chinook to get to our FOB, which is FOB Passab. And when we were on our way there, we took fire on the helicopter.
On day one?
Yeah, on day one. And our platoon sergeant, who's his third tour, so this guy seen it all, and all he said was, "Welcome Afghanistan, it's going to be one hell of a year." And then, you know, then from that point forward, it was just off and running.
Yeah.
We got to our FOB, we stayed there for about a week, and then they sent us out to our COP, which is a combat outpost, and was just our company with Bravo Company, and we had our 3 platoons there.
Yeah.
We relieved the 101st, and what they did is they went out on patrol with us. Some parts they wouldn't go to because of the experience they had there, and they just showed us on a map, you know, what had taken part there, and they didn't want to risk any more guys. They had lost a lot of guys, you know, from wounded and from KIA, so they were kind of hesitant to want to go out there. But we adapted and overcame it, and then we just continued on with our deployment.
And is your deployment then over there, is it kind of more of a patrol situation? You're kind of, like you said, you're taking over for the 101st, so are you then kind of patrolling a particular area, a particular section of the country then? Yeah,
so we were down in southern Kandahar in the Arvandoc River Valley, which they call the birthplace of the Taliban, is what they say. So when we got there, we were in this Zahari district. We were in the eastern side of it, which some of the places we have, our first place was Ash K. That was our first COP, and we shared that with the Afghan National Army. And essentially what you're doing is your platoon, which is about a 30-size man element, would go out with the A&A with us, and you'd go and talk to the local populace and, you know, see if there's anything you could do for them, help them, you know, if they're having problems with the Taliban or enemy fighters in the area, if they needed food or if they needed help with money to build a well or build schools, any way that we could help them, we would try and do.
Right.
Because once a week they called a Shura meeting, and they met with all the locals who were the head of their villages. And our lieutenant would go in there and talk with them and see what we can do for them to help them out, and vice versa, them helping us out.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow. I mean, so you know, obviously you're in a war zone, but there has to be kind of, you know, certainly with the locals, a sort of a human element to it in terms of, you know, aid and whatnot, in terms of helping these people's lives out, for example. You know, I mean, that's got to be incredibly, I would think, very rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, you could see for an example, with COP Ash K. So we were there probably for 4 or 5 months, and then they changed us, and we went into this place, McGowan, which was, at the beginning of the deployment, was real bad. All always taking enemy fire, you know, coming under fire, being there. They didn't want us there. That was one of their strongholds. But we were able during that time to push them out of there, and then we didn't want to give back what we had pushed.
Sure.
So then we made Strong Point McGowan, which eventually our whole company ended up going there. But what happened in return is that it affected the village of Ashkay. So we weren't really going there as much as we were at the beginning, because they used to be right outside, where now they're miles away.
You pushed them further out.
So we would occasionally go over there, but not, like I said, not as often as we were.
Yeah.
So towards the end of the deployment, we hadn't been there in about a month, and you could tell things changed completely. That they were, you know, they were no longer under their own control.
Right.
We went in there, and normally they were very pleasant. They would come up, the kids would come out, run up to you, ask for candy.
Yeah.
You know, everyone wanted to talk to you. But when we got in there, everyone disappeared.
Yeah.
Which through that deployment, now being at the end of the deployment, we knew that that's not a good sign. That something's going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And in their village, they had a ton of hash, which they didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
And like I said, the leader didn't want to speak with our lieutenant. We were there very briefly.
Mm-hmm.
We understood that our presence was no longer wanted there.
Right.
And as we left, we had gotten ambushed. So they knew something was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's why they all went to hide, because they don't want to be caught in the crossfires. Yeah.
So it's got to be just, you know, being over there, just such as changing dynamics in terms of, you know, the villages and the Taliban that are involved in all that, and how things can shift and change probably quite frequently, I would think. Like you said, 1 minute, you know, the village appears to be, you know, fairly safe and whatnot, and the next minute, like you said, now you come back and they're scattering, for example, or they're trying to hide. So that had to be, you know, how does one on a day-to-day basis kind of mentally keep oneself sharp and on top of their game? Because you have to be 24/7. I mean, what does that take mentally to keep on top of your game?
I'd say, you know, you're doing it for the guy to your left and the guy to your right.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, and you're expecting them to be able to do the same thing for you.
Right.
You know, any of those guys that I served with, I would instantly take a bullet for them or anything to stop them from being in harm's way. And by having that bond, I mean, the bond's unbreakable.
Right.
You know, I have two brothers, and, you know, I love them, of course, but there's just, it's different than what it is, you know, than your brother here and your brother over there. It's just, you just got to know that you need to be there for them. If you're having a tough day, they're there, they'll pick you up.
Yep.
And you know, you got to hit your mind straight, because look, I need to do this for this guy.
Exactly.
You know, and you, of course, you think about your family and everything back home.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned family back home, because, you know, in terms of contact, letters, emails, and even phone calls, what kind of contact did you have with folks back here at Norwood while you were over in Afghanistan?
So when we were at the COP, the USO helps out a ton, and they were able to provide us, I think we had 4 phones and a couple of computers. So, you know, guys would go in there and you call back home and speak to, you know, whoever you call. Like, I talk to my, you know, wife now a lot, and, you know, I spoke with my family and some of my friends, and I would always call. I felt with the Zoom, you know, with the camera and everything, it was a lot more difficult to see them than it was just to listen to their voice over the phone. Yeah. But just to hear that sense of peace in their voice, and knowing, you know, that everything's all right, and it kind of gives you that sense of calm. And but occasionally they would have to shut down comms when you're talking, because, you know, if something was to happen to someone, then they call it going black, and so you're talking in the middle of conversation, and you're like, okay, I gotta go. And as the deployment was going on, when you had to tell someone that they knew that something happened. So, you know, it was difficult at times, but because you didn't know when it would come back. We had gone on a mission that was only supposed to be about a week, which ended up turning into 2.5 weeks, and we were just living outside of the wire for that long. And it was right at Christmas time. We called it Christmas in Kalacha.
Yeah.
And we were unable to talk to the families. They were getting they were sending letters to try to find out what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, because you tell them, hey, you should hear from me in about a week or so,
Right.
and don't worry. And then it's dragging on. And back at the base, back at Fort Drum, we found out later from the wives that in the middle of the day, they'll just all of a sudden play taps. And it's because they found out that someone had died. Because one of my friends, his wife, the taps came on, and then she got a knock at the door about 5 minutes later, and she just broke down. It just ended up being a delivery guy, almost like in the movie.
Yeah, I cannot imagine.
Yeah.
Just what, you know, the family members that are obviously there to support you and whatnot, but, you know, what they have to go through, you know, in terms of like stories like that, where you hear things where there's that uncertainty has got to be incredibly difficult. You know, when Teddy Mulvihill was here the other day in his time in Vietnam, he was talking about when he left, he knew exactly when he would be coming back. You and I were talking before we came on air that you kind of had that same situation, that you knew when you were wheels down and boots in Afghanistan, you knew generally when you'd be coming back to the States. How did that help, knowing you were going to be there approximately a year, in terms of knowing that you could at least see the light, as they say, towards the end of the tunnel?
I feel for me it helped out a lot, knowing, you know, that you're not here forever.
Yeah.
You know, like the poor guys in World War II who had to make points to come back home.
Right.
You know, some of them there over 2 years.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate enough where, you know, I think we were like one of the last ones to have year-long deployment, where now the Army's cut it back. I believe they're at 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
They're no longer doing year deployments. So knowing that being there for a year was good because, like you said, you know there's an end at it. One of our squad leaders, it was his 3rd deployment, you know, same battalion, same company, same platoon. And in 06, when they were deployed, they had guys at the end, which was supposed to be the year, come home, get off the plane, and their families there waiting, just to be told, hey, you got to get back on.
Turn around.
Yeah, we're going back over there.
Yeah.
And he ended up spending almost close to 22 months over there. So I mean, I couldn't imagine it going through something like that.
Yeah.
You know, especially coming home and.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you had mentioned that it's not a full year in that you do get, as you talk, you know, like hopefully a midway break. Mm-hmm. What's that like, and how does that again kind of work into your psyche about knowing you've got a break coming up, so to speak?
Yeah. So you get over there. They call it a mid-tour leave, but it's not necessarily in the middle because you can't send everybody home at one time.
Yeah.
So when we get there, you have no idea when it's going to be. They didn't even start talking about it until pretty much the beginning of April. We got there around the middle of March. And that's when they started talking about you had to put in for a time off that you would want to try to go. And they basically prioritize if someone had a valid excuse to be home at this time, they were going to most likely give it to them. Mm-hmm. But we had some guys that they were gone in the middle of April, and they came back at the beginning of May. Now they had from May all the way to March.
Yeah.
They had nothing to look forward to.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough where mine was in July. So I got, you know, it was 5 months there, then came back for another 7 months.
Right.
So, I mean, you're very lucky to have that break. So part of it also, though, it's not, you don't like it.
Yeah.
Because you're there, you first get there, things are happening, and then you get accustomed to it, and you start getting into a routine now. You know, you're going out on patrol, and you're used to everything going a certain way. And then they break it up on you. Now, okay, you're going to go back home to this country that you love to see your friends and family, and you're going to have a blast for 10 days. And then it's like, okay, now you have to go back.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost like you don't even want it.
Right.
Like, I'm here, let me just do my time.
Finish my time.
And then I'll go home and then I'll have fun.
That's right.
Like, I don't want to go there and get it, like you're almost getting a piece of it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. They're kind of toying with you and then
right.
taking
It's
it
like,
back.
here's this beautiful piece of cake. You can only take one bite, and then you can have the rest later.
That's right. You were telling me, though, about your trip home at your mid-leave. Do that story for me again. I think that's just a great story about your trip back here to Norwood for your.
Oh,
for your
yeah.
mid-leave.
So when I left, we stopped in Kuwait and we were there for a couple of days. And my girlfriend, well, my wife now, I'm just going to refer to her as my wife. To make it. So she pulled off a really good surprise on me when I was in Korea. So my first time out of basic, I went to Korea. I was stationed there for a year. Yeah. And I came home, same time I came home in July. So just, I don't know, I guess July is my good month.
Yeah, yeah.
So I came home, and the entire time I told her, I said, hey, don't tell anybody. I want to surprise everybody. And she's like, yeah. So I come home from Korea. She picks me up from the airport, and as we're coming down the escalator, get all of my friends and family there with all these signs and everything.
That's great, yeah.
So she got me good.
Right.
So I knew I couldn't tell her when I was going to be coming home this time.
Because everybody would know.
Yeah. So I told her, she had a general idea of when it would be. And I had talked to my father and my brother, and I told them they were the ones picking me up from the airport. I said, hey, I told Nick that there's a delay, and so don't let her know. Right. And they're like, okay. So, they get me from the airport. We drive home. We go down. My father owns the Colonial, so we call it the restaurant. We went down to the restaurant, and so I told my dad, I said, well, call her, let her, tell her what's going on. Yeah. So he calls. He tells her that it's delayed again, and she's all upset. And he's like, well, why don't you come down here? We'll probably leave soon. So she said, okay. So I hid in the bathroom, and she's talking to my father at the bar, and I come out of the bathroom, and I tap her on the shoulder, and her face when she turned around was like, who is this person? Don't you know I'm in the middle of talking to someone?
Yeah. How rude.
And then she realized it was me, and then she, of course, broke down and everything. But it was great to be able to pull the surprise on her.
It's funny. I think, you see those reunions, the news will show them when, people are coming home and their child, for example, or their wife or their husband is not expecting it, and just like they walk into the gym or they walk into the restaurant. Those types of moments that are captured are unbelievable. Yeah. Just unbelievable. You could watch those, and if you don't feel something, when you see a reunion like that, to me, like you almost have no soul, because to see something like that. So I think that's just such a special moment. But so you got to go back, like you said, you've got that small slice of cake, and now you've got the rest of it when you come back. As you're counting down then, knowing you're going to be, your year is about up, what's that part like, knowing you're just about done, and once you get home, that's it, you don't have to worry about coming back? What's going through your mind then?
Just to touch on the reunion thing, I'd have to say that, you give someone a hug, you give them a hug, but there's nothing like receiving a hug from a loved one that's you've been away for a long time. Like, that's just one of the greatest feelings, getting that hug, whether it be from your girlfriend, your wife, your mother, your father, whoever. Yeah. That's an amazing thing.
That's a great point.
So we went back over there. My platoon ended up moving, so now they're at Kop Zahari, and what they were doing out there was they were building schools for the locals. These were families that were pushed out of their areas by the Taliban, and now they were in this, almost like a camp, that we were there to help them out and basically with their personal protection. Right. So I caught up with them there, and when he came back, it was great to see everybody again, and it's great to see that everyone was still there, that before you left. Yeah, sure. So you just catch up with your stores and everything, and then before you know, you're back out there and you're going and doing your thing again. And it took some adjustment time getting back into, hey, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing again. But it was good. I mean, like I said, we had a few months after that, and it was a good few months. We had a couple close calls, but it was a very good time. And like I said, coming home was just the best.
I got to imagine. So when you come home, knowing that your tour is done, and you're back here in Norwood, what's like the first thing that you want to do when you get back here to Norwood?
Honestly, it would probably drink a beer. It's the nice
head down to the restaurant,
nice cold Budweiser. Yeah,
that's right.
No, going and seeing everybody. You want to try to see everybody. There's just no better feeling than coming home. Sure. One thing is, like, you never realized how great a rug is when you stepping out of the shower. Like that's just one thing that always stuck in my mind, that You know, you get out of the shower with your flip-flops on, and then your feet are all sandy and
Yeah.
dirty by the time you get back to your tent.
Right.
So getting out of the shower and stepping onto a mat is an amazing thing. You know, and those are those little things that we take for granted every day.
Right.
You know, now people have heated bathroom floors.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, again, it is things that for you know, someone like myself who is not served would not have an appreciation for that. But, you know, someone like yourself who, it's little things that you notice now that are, you know, little comforts that all of us kind of take for granted, and we probably shouldn't.
Right.
But you've got, you know, so much of a better understanding of that because of what you've done for our country. So I think that's unbelievable. You come back, now you've got to say, all right, I've served my country, and an opportunity presents itself through the Norwood Police Department. How did that all kind of transpire?
Yeah, so I got out November 2012. Not sure really what I wanted to do. You know, I took the police and fire. Growing up, always wanted to be a firefighter. That was my backdraft sucked me in, and I was going to be Russell Crowe.
Sure.
Or Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell, yeah.
You know, so that's what I wanted to do. But honestly, being in Afghanistan and doing what we did over there, seeing everybody change and, you know, just the difference you were making, I felt like that was something that you could do as a police officer, you know, and that's something that really sat with me and something I wanted to do. And so I took the police test and the fire, and, you know, whatever one came knocking first, I was going to jump at, and it happened to be the police with Norwood. So it was almost 2 years to the date of getting out. I got hired, and, you know, it's just another great check mark in this long life of ours, and I'm very thankful to have the opportunity for.
It is a fantastic story. But I guess in that time span, you get out in 12 and get hired in 2014. Sometimes, you know, there's talk of that transitioning back to civilian life, you know, from the military type existence. How did you find that transition from your time in Afghanistan, where you are in harm's way 24/7, back here to now, again, you know, kind of getting, you know, walking on a rug out of a shower? I mean, how did you make that transition? Did you find it difficult?
I did not really find it that difficult. For me, I think I'm very fortunate. You know, I have an amazing wife. I have an amazing family, amazing friends, where it's almost, you know, like that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Is that great support cast that I had, it just made it that much easier. They probably don't even know that they made it that much easier for me. You know, they weren't peppering you about things or anything like that. You know, like, I know one of my best friends, Mike Mo's filming this right now. He was one of the guys when I came home. Like, we've been friends since junior high. You know, we're a typical town. He said how Norwood is. But these guys, they just, it was like I never left. And by them treating me that way and not treating me any differently, I feel like made it a lot easier for me. You know, if I came home and I was the outcast, they kind of shunned me away or whatever, or thought I was acting different, I feel like maybe my transition would have been a lot more difficult. But like I said, my wife is an amazing woman, and she stuck with me the whole entire time. We've been together since class of 07. You know, we started dating senior year of high school and been together ever since, and now we have 2 beautiful kids.
That's awesome.
But just having that support is, I think it's what everyone needs. If you come back, you know, I had one of my best friends when I served, he came back and it wasn't as easy for him. You know, he battled with PTSD, battled with drug abuse, battled with alcoholism, lost his wife, lost his kids, lost a house, lost his job, everything, which no one knows, no one sees it. I had spoken with a Vietnam veteran one time when I was at the VA, and he told me that if it wasn't for our war, that they would have no idea how to understand them. Because they came home, they told you to get out of your uniform and don't talk about the war. And it's like, especially those guys went through a lot worse than what we did. And, you know, they saw so much more. And now I could not imagine coming home and never, you know, like this great television show about this. You know, it's just, it's awesome that the support's there and people are starting to realize the understanding of it, and they try to help you out. You know, the VA, they do a lot for you. They try to do as much as they can.
Yeah.
There's so many resources out there.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I am not a townie. I'm not originally from Norwood.
We won't hold that against you.
I appreciate that. You still came in to talk to me. Thank you.
Well, I didn't know
But
that.
at least I'm not from Walpole, so, you know, so that works out okay. But, you know, just in the course of having lived here and having, you know, met a number of veterans and spoken with Teddy Mulvihill on a number of occasions, you know, what you're saying is what I've learned so much about this town in terms of its support and for its veterans. And what you just said, you know, in terms of what Mike Maloof, for example, you know, and all of your friends and the town kind of does for its veterans is fantastic. You know, and Teddy said the same thing, that the support that is there for every veteran, it just, again, there are those that don't have that net, so to speak, you know, that help and it can fall through. And I'm just so thankful that we do have that here in this town.
Yeah.
It's just such a special place. It
Yeah,
really is.
honestly, like, coming home and getting out of the service, Teddy Mulvihill's the greatest man.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
he doesn't take anything for it.
No.
But he does so much behind the scenes, and no one even realizes it. You know, half of them probably don't even know who he is, other than his great speeches that that he gives on Veterans Day and Memorial Day and everything.
Yeah.
But he does so much to help. Every time you come in there, he knows every soldier's name or Marine, Navy, whoever it may be. Yeah. And he knows it, and he's tells you something, he's going to do it. And you know, he's awesome. He helps out so much.
It really is. He's a very, very special man. Very special man for our town, for sure. You know, I would be remiss, as I mentioned, not to ask you about your hockey experience at Froggies a couple of years ago with you and Officer Droney, because it would, you know, somebody just happened to capture it. And for those that don't know, you and Officer Droney one day just showed up and decided to skate with some of the little kids on Froggies with in full equipment.
Yep.
What kind of prompted that, and what was that all like?
You know, that was probably one of my favorite all time, which we call one of the departments walk and talks. And you know, the chief really loves us being out there, which, you know, it does a great thing for our relationship with the community. You look at some of these other departments around here, they don't have that same relationship. You know, it makes us very approachable. So one of the dispatchers, Jimmy Maroney's another townie guy, he said, he's like, hey, there's a bunch of kids playing hockey down at Froggies. You guys should go down there. Yeah. And we happened to have enough guys on that night. And so I grabbed Cedrone, I cleared it with our sergeant. He's like, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah. So we went down there and started playing with it. I didn't even know they were videotaping.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And of course, the one video, I got dangling this 7-year-old kid. They don't want to show my beautiful saucer pass that resulted in a one-time goal. Right. You know, they show me with these kids. But it was awesome. It was, you know, just little things like that. You know, it shows that we're also a human. We're not this RoboCop, you know, that sometimes is portrayed to be. Yeah, yeah. It was a great moment. I remember hearing about it, and when Mike had mentioned that he'd be able to get a hold of you to come in here today, I go, gotta ask, because I know as a hockey guy, I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, I really, really do. It wasn't too great for us, Jordan. He's not the best skater out there, so. Hey. He was actually the same size as him. I forgot he was a cop for a second. Yeah. Listen, you know, officer, I have to thank you for coming in this evening. Thank you for having me. You know, and I don't know if sometimes it sounds cliche when people say thank you for your service, but you know, in all honesty, having been working with NCM to try to get as many, you know, of you guys and the men and women that have served our country from Norwood in here. For me, you know, and Mike, it's just kind of a labor of love to get to know all of you guys. So I'm sincere when I say thank you for, you know, all that you did, all that you continue to do in terms of your service to the community and, you know, protecting all of us. And it really, you know, maybe it doesn't get said enough, but thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. I love doing it. It's great. It's not a job if you love doing it, right? Right, exactly. So thank you again for coming in and talk to us tonight. Of course. We really appreciate it. Thank you. I want to thank Mike Maloof, who, you know, like you said, one of your best friends, classmate, who, you know, reached out and continues to reach out to our veterans, but reached out to you and brought you in. And so
Thank you to Mike Maloof, not only for getting our guests tonight, but also for putting this all together. Mark Hoover for NCM, thank you for joining us as we continue to meet our Norwood veterans. Have a great evening.